The Trump family is cashing in like crazy. It's just incredible. The $2 billion that was given by the United Arab Emirates to the families of Steve Witkoff and Donald Trump, the companies that are run by Steve Witkoff's son and Donald Trump's sons, apparently in exchange for us giving them hundreds of thousands of these NVIDIA top secret, super security AI chips that are not supposed to be exported from the United States, in particular to a country that has a joint military cooperation agreement with China, which is the United Arab Emirates. Yes, they do joint military exercises with China. They swap military hardware with China. But hey, you give $2 billion to the Trump family, you're golden. Yeah. Meanwhile, something weird happened last week. Remember when China put their export restrictions? I'm trying to remember the exact phrase, and forgive me, I don't have it, but I believe it was a form of export restriction that, in fact, I don't believe that all the details are out yet. But they basically said that they're going to limit the export of rare earth minerals. China is the world's largest producer of rare earth minerals. They don't have an exclusive on it. But after South African immigrant Elon Musk, who hated the Agency for International Development, the USAID, because by cutting off aid to South Africa back in the 80s, basically the USAID was responsible for the fall of the apartheid regime. And Musk apparently has hated them ever since, at least according to the reports I've read. And so he did away with it. And, this was aid to some, 50 some odd African and other very poor countries that was supporting the lives of millions and millions of people. And so China came in and said, we'll give you aid. And several of these countries have rare earth minerals. So there's that. But anyhow, so China says, we're going to restrict the sale of rare earth minerals. And right after they did that, an anonymous crypto wallet transferred $1 billion into stablecoins. Now, stablecoins are crypto coins that are pegged to the dollar. So, if cryptocurrency goes wild in terms of getting more or less expensive, like Bitcoin, is hundreds of thousands of dollars per Bitcoin now. So if it rises or falls, stablecoins don't. So if you want to make a bet in crypto, you do stable coins if you think that other crypto coins are going to fall. And that's exactly what they did. They put $1 billion into stable coins and then started placing buy orders, $100 million worth of buy orders on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and multiple other altcoins. At the same moment, the market just collapsed. I mean, billions were wiped out. Bitcoin dropped by $20,000. Altcoins were down from 60 to 70%. And this was not random. This was orchestrated. This was coordinated. This was market manipulation. That one anonymous Bitcoin wallet that appears to have inside information that Donald Trump was going to come out and say, I'm going to put a 100% tariff on China, because he said that, and within seconds of his saying that, the Bitcoin market just went nuts, as did the stock market. But with Bitcoin, there's no agency that tracks who's trading what. You have no idea who this was. Could have been Don Jr., or it could have been just some psychic someplace who knew what Trump was going to say. I mean, who knows? But whoever it was, they made a $200 million profit in about 6 hours. Now, how do they know to move $1 billion into stablecoins? This is what corruption looks like. Somebody had inside information, or somebody just placed an insanely good bet. Oh, we know this is, I'm not buying that. Meanwhile, the federal government is sitting on $1.6 trillion in student debt. Now, those of you who have been longtime listeners to this program know that I think this is an obscenity, that we have that we even have student debt in the United States. I mean, from the Civil War forward, we basically didn't. Abraham Lincoln, with the Morrill Act, allocated federal land. As I recall, it was 72 sites. I may be wrong. Fact check me on that, but it was in that neighborhood. More than 60, fewer than 80. Pieces of federal land, and gave them to the states with the explicit instruction to use this land to fund colleges so that American students can go to college for very, very cheap or for free. One of those colleges was the college that my mother graduated from, Michigan State University. She graduated magna cum laude, or laude. And she paid for her tuition. Now, this was in the 1940s. She paid for her tuition working as a lifeguard in her hometown of Charlevoix, Michigan, on Lake Michigan, in the summers, and propping and washing airplanes at the Lansing Airport. She was also a pilot. And you could do that back then. I mean, you could go to college with a part-time job. In fact, in 1968, I went to college with a part-time job. I didn't graduate from college like my mom did, but, I worked as a dishwasher at Bob's Big Boy, and I was a DJ at WITL, and I pumped gas at an Esso station. So then the Reagan administration came along and said, this is crazy. We got some banker friends who want to make some serious money here. And we can do it with student debt. Now, when Reagan came into office, 80% of the cost of college tuition was paid for by state and federal governments. Or in the case of like Michigan State University, University of Michigan, these other, land grant colleges, they were called, the ones that Lincoln funded, they had their own, their own revenue sources. So it used to be your tuition covered about 20% of the cost of college. Now, as a result of Reaganism, 44 years of Reaganism, tuition now covers 80% of the cost of college, and state and federal grants, by and large, only cover about 20%. So it's been reversed. And this was the great, Republican idea. And the way that Republicans justify this is they say, well, if you don't go into debt, if you don't have skin in the game, you don't value your education, which is complete horse crap. My dad, when he got out, he straight out of high school, he volunteered for World War II in 1945. And when he got out of the Army in 47, there was the GI Bill. And he went to college for 2.5 years on the GI Bill until Mom got pregnant with me and I got born, and Dad had to drop out of college and go to work in a steel plant in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And he was paid $100 a month to go to school. The GI Bill gave you a stipend to help cover room and board and your books, and tuition was free. And multiple hundreds of thousands, mostly of young men, went through. My wife's father, Bob Gussie, also, he went all the way through. He got his law degree on the GI Bill, didn't pay a penny, and became the Assistant Attorney General for the state of Michigan. And what we know now, from looking back on the GI Bill from 1947 until 1965 when the program ended, is that for every dollar that we invested in sending one of these young people to college, we as a country made an additional $7 in tax revenue that we wouldn't have gotten because these people had an education that caused them to earn more money than they would have otherwise earned, and they therefore paid more in taxes. We also got a generation in the 60s, 70s, 80s. We got a generation of doctors and lawyers and scientists, and we led the world in all these fields because we had the most educated workforce in the world at the time because of the GI Bill. And then the Republicans came along and said, this is crazy. Why should billionaires' tax dollars pay for, the children of poor people to go to college? So it's always been about the money. And it's always been about the banksters. And the banksters are sitting on about $1 trillion with a student loan right now, but the federal government is sitting on $1.6 trillion in student loans. And the banksters have been salivating over this, and they've been leaning on the GOP for years, saying, hey, just give us those student loans. After all, you guys passed this law back in 2005 that said that you can no longer use bankruptcy to get rid of a student loan? So these are guaranteed, this is guaranteed money. And we can charge 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%. We can charge whatever we want. And now the Trump administration is planning, according to news reports, this is from The Guardian, officials in the Trump administration are reportedly weighing the possibility of selling portions of the federal government's $1.6 trillion student loan portfolio to private investors, reshaping the student loan landscape. It's 45 million Americans. And of course, the private investors are heavy donors to the Republican Party. This would also make it impossible to do what Joe Biden tried to do. You know, he tried to cancel student debt because you've got 45 million Americans. You've got an entire generation of young people, you know, unlike my generation who, you know, I mean, Louise and I bought our first house in our 20s. You've got an entire generation of people who can't even afford to get married, much less buy a house until they're in their 30s or 40s because they have student debt. It is hurting our country. It's holding us back, but it's making an enormous amount of money for a small handful of New York bankers who are major funders of the GOP. So here we go. Now we know why President Trump and Education Secretary Linda McMahon are hell-bent on squeezing every last dollar out of families with student debt, says Mike Pierce, Executive Director of Protect Borrowers. He says, once again, we see across the Trump administration when Wall Street's demands run against the financial needs of working people, the banks get what they want from the GOP. Surprise, surprise.